Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the signs of a further shift in focus from the media, as well as politicians really, on Brexit. In particular, the supposedly independent BBC spent the first couple of years of Brexit actively editing out any mention of the B word when they were interviewing business owners about why they were suddenly struggling, to producing a report that is now linking Brexit and Brexit policy with our economic problems. This will be part of a more general shift in public opinion as we get ready for a shift in Brexit policies from the government as well. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, reminder, I'll be on tomorrow's Sunday roast. I'll post a link in the description below if you are interested. But very recently, there has been a big change in the way Brexit is being viewed in Britain. And let's be honest, what we really mean is England. A few weeks ago, I attended the first major Rejoin demonstration in London. It was supposed to have taken place in September, but it was postponed due to the Queen's death. And I said at the time that I think it turned out to be better timed in October because there had been a fundamental shift in the way Brexit is perceived. We've not only seen some pretty major movements in the polls, but both the media and the government are shifting their position a bit as well. Brexit was never going to survive contact with the real world, but it has spent a couple of years sheltering under cover of the pandemic and Russian war. But Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng exposed Brexit's lunacy in a fairly impressive way. So the economic ideas of Brexit exploded, and Rishi Sunak will now have to work out a way to stop the regulatory ideas doing the same. I'm not an economist, but if the retained EU law bill were to be passed in its current form, I can see that being just as devastating to market stability as Kwarteng's budget. Only it will not be fixed as quickly or as easily. I think Sunak will realise this as well and do what he can to water it down. He's likely to have the help of the House of Lords in this regard as well. And speaking of Sunak, although he is the first genuine Brexiteer Prime Minister, he looks like being the first to face the reality of our post-Brexit future. There is real optimism that a Northern Ireland Protocol deal is genuinely not far away. I mean, don't take anything for granted, of course. We've been here before. But the government's decision not to trigger Stormont elections until next year is actually a good sign. The reason being that if those elections were to be held now, nothing's changed since the ones earlier this year, so we're probably just going to get the same result. By delaying them, the government are essentially saying that they expect to be able to present something to the people and politicians of Northern Ireland that will rebalance the dynamic and allow Stormont to convene. In fact, they've basically said as much. Now, they may be wrong. It may be that the DUP hate what they get and put Stormont permanently into mothballs. But the government seem to think that they can deliver something that makes it worthwhile delaying the Stormont elections and that they must intend to deliver it very early on next year. And that's encouraging. There's also talk of Sunak entering into negotiation with the EU in terms of like a defence pact. You know, the Brexiteers are going absolutely loopy at the rumours, mind you. But again, a sign of Brexit pragmatism. That Sunak feels comfortable engaging with the EU, where Johnson deliberately tried to keep them at arm's length, tells you that not only is there a definite shift in government policy, but that the majority of Tory MPs are comfortable with it. After all, it would be a waste of time Sunak negotiating an agreement with the EU on anything if his own MPs will not back it. But we've also had a shift in the media. A couple of weeks ago, there was a BBC panel with a Tory MP and a Labour MP on it. And I remember the BBC presenter actively interrupting them to get them to talk about Brexit. Unimaginable a few months ago. Now we have a report on the news that our economy contracted during the last quarter, making it almost certain that a formal recession will be declared early next year. There was a lot of commentary about the last quarter. Whenever it looked like it might actually be a small amount of growth, the Brexiteers all cheered. Whenever it looked like actually it'd be contraction, then they went quiet. Well, now that the results are definitely in and it's formally declared a contraction, they're not bringing the issue up anymore. They're seizing on forecasts to shout about. Whenever you see a Brexiteer saying how well the UK economy is doing, it's very likely to be based on a forecast rather than the actual data, because that's all they've got, really. Forecasts which make our economy look like it's doing all right. But the problem is when the real data comes in, the forecasts always look to have been a little bit too optimistic, sometimes a lot too optimistic. But that's not important now. Slight contraction or slight growth doesn't really matter. Whether it's plus 0.2% or minus 0.2%, it's a stagnant economy either way. Especially when we're the only G7 economy which has still not reached our pre-COVID GDP. Remember, all growth is growth. When people are comparing growth for different countries, fine, okay. But when you look at the growth figure for the UK, it's not compared with France or the United States. It's compared with the UK. Growth of whatever means that the UK economy is larger than the UK economy was a few months ago. So when our economy is already fallen so far behind the rest of the G7, it should be much easier to promote good growth figures, but we're still struggling. You know, and this is something that a BBC News article pointed out, the fact that we are still way behind other G7 economies. Its report on the latest economic news has surprised many because it's talking about Brexit. Because what it has done in the past is it's painted the economic picture. It's said what's going on, but it hasn't said why it's going on. You know, the elephant was always in the room. It's alluded to things. You'd have to sort of, you know, say, well, they're talking about Brexit here. You know, a bit like when they talk about labour shortages. Well, what caused the labour shortages? You know, but more than that, it's talking about Brexit in terms that an independent economist would, rather than a member of the ERG. It's sort of gone more Financial Times than Daily Express. And this is important because the BBC has a large reach to ordinary voters, especially swing voters, because it's seen as independent. I mean, it sort of is and it sort of isn't. But it's the perception that counts. Everyone knows that newspapers are biased one way or the other. They don't always fully appreciate the specific nature of the bias, but they all know it is. But the BBC is seen as more honest. So reporting honestly is really important. It was quite clear that people's views of Brexit has been shifting. Even most of those who still support Brexit think it's going really badly. It doesn't really matter whether people think Brexit is going badly because Brexit was always going to be bad, or just if they think it's because the government have cocked it up. Doesn't actually matter from the government's point of view, because it means that they are still seen to be failing and they have to do something different. But it also means the media need to address the issues more openly as well. Because if they don't, people will just get their information elsewhere. That's why the Daily Express and the Daily Mail, they've been posting articles about Brexit for ages. I mean, for quite a long time, I did a weekly thing on what they were talking about. You know, so they had Brexit articles all the time and often were reporting on the damage of Brexit. Not because they changed their mind, but because they needed to address what they know are important issues for their readers, what their readers are going to find out anyway. And they don't want those readers to find the information somewhere else. I mean, they might end up reading an article written by someone telling the truth. Wouldn't that be awful? 3 weeks ago, the Financial Times posted a video on the realities of Brexit. Superb piece of reporting. It has gathered nearly 4.5 million views so far on YouTube. This BBC article also asks the question as to why the UK is being hit so much harder than other advanced economies. Yes, the war. Yes, COVID. But other countries are dealing with those as well, it says. Why is the UK failing so much worse? And it doesn't just leave the question hanging. For possibly the first time, really, it turns the camera to the elephant in the room and says, look, the elephant is Brexit. I'll give you a quote from this article. So after talking about Brexit policy, it says, and I quote, "It is more difficult for small businesses especially to trade with Europe, and the UK by design now has limited access to pools of European workers. As a result, the economy is less productive, less resilient, less flexible and less responsive." Break it down. It is saying quite clearly that the UK by design, in other words, formal government policy, not an unintended consequence, not something that just happened, it's a specific feature of Brexit, that we've got limited access to workers. And it says, as a result, as a direct result, the economy is now less productive, less resilient, less flexible and less responsive. Something that independent economists have been saying for some time. Brexit was supposed to make us more productive, more resilient, more flexible, more responsive. That's what we were promised. We asked how it was supposed to do this, and Boris Johnson said, with the awesome power of belief. Who'd have thought that a government run on unicorn poo would have given us the reverse of what it promised? I am telling you, there is a very noticeable shift here. This change in public polling, first of all, then the shift in the media, then the change of policies from the government. These are the aftershocks of that mini budget. The job now for anti-Brexit groups is to recognise that we've had a seismic shift, capitalise. Public opinion is not a smooth line on a graph. You can't extrapolate. You can't say, oh, well, it's shifting, so in a year's time it'll have shifted this far. It doesn't work like that. It chops and changes. It goes up and down. You get moments. You get moments where the public are suddenly interested in a thing. And it's important to engage with people in those moments. There'll be others as well. The way I see it, we've got 3 periods of Brexit time here coming up. The current one, which lasts up until the next election. It's very good that the government are pursuing practical Brexit policies now. But they are still wedded to the general concept of a hard Brexit. The opportunity here is to engage Labour's key voters. The Labour manifesto will reflect what those voters want. That's it, just those small number of voters. Then we'll have the next Parliament, which looks almost certain to be run by a Labour government. So what goes in that manifesto is important. We want to encourage them to pursue much more of a pragmatic programme of alignment so that we can then be ready for the 3rd period, for the following Parliament, which I hope is rejoining the single market and getting public opinion turning properly against Brexit, getting people to be honest about Brexit, to face up to it. As for the customs union, I don't quite know where we are with that. Labour is saying no to it, but I want to see the precise wording in the manifesto because I don't know what they actually mean. Do they mean no to the customs union or no to any customs union? I would find it odd if they mean the latter. I don't see how that makes sense. If it's just the definitive article they're saying no to, well, there's no reason for Labour not to pursue some sort of bespoke customs union, which can always be improved upon later. But I think come next year and the rejoin March, whenever that is, but it sounds like it's going to be an annual thing. I think it might be very interesting. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.